mas que a fome de comida saciava a fome de amor. Sempre em prece por Jesus.
Pai nosso, que estás no céu, santificado seja o vosso nome. Venha a nós o vosso reino, seja feita a vossa vontade, assim na terra como no céu, assim na terra como no céu. O pão nosso de cada dia dai-nos hoje, ó Senhor. Perdoai as nossas dívidas, assim como perdoamos aos nossos devedores. Não deixeis cair em tentação, mas livrai-nos de todo o mal. Não deixeis cair em tentação, mas livrai-nos de todo o mal.
Hello, everyone. We are once again here on behalf of the United States Spiritist Federation with our series of talks, having guest speakers that are giving us these talks from all over the world. Today, we have our dear friend, Dr. Vicente Pessoa. And this is a series that is in preparation for our 14th Spiritist Symposium. This year, our annual Spiritist Symposium is going to be a virtual one. And the topic that we are going to be talking about is soul searching in a technological era, June 6 and June 7. So don't miss it. As always, we will start our preparation with a prayer, and then we are going to be introducing our guest speaker today, and after that we will enjoy his talk. So let us all raise our thoughts, our hearts, asking for the blessings of the benefactors that have been assisting, guiding us in this work of dissemination of love and light on earth, especially on those moments that we are so much looking for understanding, for comfort, from assistance. We pray that the good spirits on behalf of our Heavenly Creator may be able to help, guide, and assist us, and that we may feel their presence during this study we are about to have. And we ask permission to start with our program today. So as I said before, our guest speaker today is Dr. Vicente Pessoa. Dr. Vicente Pessoa is a physician of infectious disease and is currently the vice president of the Spiritist Medical Association of Goiânia. And he has agreed and find a time in his schedule to talk to us about scientific and spiritual aspects of forgiveness. Dr. Vicente, you're more than welcome, and we are really hoping to learn a lot from you. I know that this is a topic that speaks dearly to your heart. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Jussara, and our friends from the U.S. Spirit Federation. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all. This is going to be my first talk in English, so let's see how things will work out. So when we talk about forgiveness, we have to remember that this was one of the most important teachings that Jesus brought us in the Gospels during his life on earth. It's the core of his teachings. One of the most important parts of what he left us. To forgive, it's a kind of charity, and it's a kind of love. You cannot love if you cannot forgive. So you were right when you said this is a very dear topic to me, especially in my medical practice, in my office, in my medical office, because I realized that my patients, they had a lot of problems forgiving. Since I am an infectious disease doctor, I have a lot of HIV patients, and I realized that my patients, they had this difficult to forgive themselves and to forgive life and to forgive their family because they were infected with HIV. And I also realized that those that could cope better with forgiving their own condition, they evolved better during treatment. So I began to ask myself a few questions. And the most important of them was, does forgiveness is really good for your health? Do you benefit your health if you forgive people and if you forgive yourself? And after that, I started to search in the medical literature for papers, scientific papers, that could bring me information about scientific evidence that forgiving others and forgiving yourself was good for your health. And that's how everything begins. So I intend to begin this talk telling you a story, a real story, that happened in 1994. This story took place in a very small country located in the heart of the African continent. It's a very small country geographically, and for the first world countries, let's put it in this way, for the first world countries, it's a very insignificant country because it has no power in politics and no power in economics. So it's a very small country that is ignored by the first world countries. And this country is Rwanda. Rwanda has a population of 12 million people. Its capital is Kigali. And of these 12 million people, they are basically, they have basically two ethnic groups. One of these groups is called Hutus, and the other groups is called Tutsis. And as we always see in a country where there are a lot of ethnic different groups, there is tension between them, among them. They are always fighting, they are always in conflict. So in 1994, the president of Rwanda was a Hutu, and he was flying in his airplane with his government, with his ministers, and the plane crashed, and everybody lost their lives. So, as soon as possible, the Hutus accused the Tutsis of being responsible for the plane crash. And immediately, a conflict began. So the Hutus thought they had the right, after the accident, to kill all the Tutsis they could find in front of them. And one of the saddest stories in human history took place in Rwanda in 1994. A true genocide where the Hutus began to kill Tutsis. In a very short period of time, from April to July 1994, more than 2 million Tutsis were killed by Hutus. Imagine that in a country with 12 million people. Not only that, but the women, the Tutsi women, were raped by Hutu men. And the children who were born victim of this sexual violence, they are also killed. So it shocked the world, and governments had to interfere. So troops were sent to Rwanda. The Red Cross was sending medical support, food, and everything else. But it was too late. More than 2 million people lost their lives in this genocide. So it is in this context, in this moment of the history of Rwanda, that we will find our main character of today's talk. His name is Jean-Paul Samputu. Samputu is a musician in Rwanda. He is a very famous musician in Rwanda. As we have famous musicians in Brazil that everybody knows, and famous musicians in the US that all Americans know, Samputu was very famous and very well known in Rwanda. He loved music, and he had been studying music since he was a child. And he happened to be a Tutsi. So his friends and his family advised him to leave the country, because since he was a very famous person and he was Tutsi, he could be a target for the Hutus. It would be very important and very interesting for the Hutus to have Samputu's head on a table. That would bring more strength to the movement of genocide. So, afraid for his life, Samputu took his wife and his 2 children and left the country. He began to live in the countries nearby Rwanda. But it didn't take long for Samputu to get bad news from Rwanda. He learned that his father, his mother, his sister, and his 2 brothers were coldly killed by Hutus. So now, from now on, Samputu was alone in the world with his wife and his 2 children. That impacted him in a very strong way. In a very strong way. He had what I used to call a mind fracture. His mind was broken. His emotions were broken. And he didn't know what to do anymore. And that is how we find Samputu dedicating himself to drinking alcohol, to using drugs, and a process of deep depression installed in his mind and in his heart. He searched for help. He looked for psychiatrists, therapists, psychologists, doctors all over the world in a few weeks, but nobody could help him. His wife left him because he was abusing drugs and took his 2 children away from him. So he didn't know what else to do anymore. And then the genocide was over. A few weeks later, the genocide was over, and people could come back to Rwanda. And Samputu was one of them, but now he had no family, no wife, and no children. And he was dying. This depression was killing him. He was not able to live anymore, and he had suicidal thoughts. So, talking to a friend, this friend told him that in Rwanda, in the country, there was this very wise man that could advise him on what to do, and that Samputu should search this man, should go look for this man, because he would be able to help him. And then he had nothing to lose, and he decided to look for this man. And he was very lucky, because this man was really a wise man. And the advice that this man gave Samputu was an advice that nobody else had given him before. This man told him, in order to recover from this depression and search happiness again, search the joy of life again, there is only one way. You have to forgive the people who killed your father, your mother, your sister, and your 2 brothers. There is no other way. If you don't forgive them, you will die of depression. And that's the point where I would like to ask a question. Is there a limit or a limitation for forgiveness? What are you able to forgive? What is your limit to forgive? Are you able to forgive the driver who is in a hurry and blocks you in the traffic? Are you able to forgive your husband or your wife who leaves their clothes on the couch? Are you able to forgive your boss who goes to work in a bad mood? Or are you able to forgive somebody who killed your father, your mother, your sister, and your 2 brothers? What is your limit? And I mean, not in a matter of quantity, amount, because Jesus told us to forgive 70 times 7, which does not mean that we should forgive people 490 times, and when they are aggressive to us 491 times, we are free not to forgive. That's not what he meant. He meant that we should forgive people as many times as possible, and even for the same aggression, if possible. But the idea I would like to bring is the quality of the forgiveness, not the quantity, not the amount. It's the quality of forgiveness. What can you forgive? How strong is your ability to forgive? How strong is your confidence in God and in Jesus' teachings to forgive brutal aggressions? So, on to her person to die. We keep reading that and listening that in philosophical books, religious books, and all sort of books, all sort of leaders, religious leaders, philosophical leaders, tell us that we should forgive others, that it's good for us, that forgiveness brings us freedom to live in peace. And that's the question I made myself. Is this really true? Is there any scientific evidence that forgiving people makes me happier, makes me healthier? So, inspired by these questions, that's when I started to begin this search about scientific evidence that forgiveness brings us health and happiness. But to understand that, I thought that, first of all, I should understand what is forgiveness. And second of all, I should understand what is health. What's the definition of forgiveness? And what's the definition of health? And I started searching those definitions. And I found so many different definitions for forgiveness. But for the purpose of this presentation, for this talk, I decided to choose one that I thought was the best one, that we could work around. So, for me, the best definition of forgiveness is this one. What is forgiveness exactly? To forgive is not forget. It's not to forget. This is amnesia. To forgive is when somebody hurts you, you do remember, but you do not feel pain anymore. If you get to that level, to remember an aggression, and you don't feel pain anymore, you probably forgave those people. So, do you believe that Jesus forgot completely that he was crucified? Do you believe that Stephen, or Estevam in Portuguese, forgot completely that people threw stones and rocks at his face, making him lose his life? They did not forgive. It's in their memory. They do not have an amnesia. Everything that we learn, everything that we feel, and everything that we experience, we bring with us to the spiritual world. It's impregnated in our perispirit, right? So, the aggressions. But we need to learn how to cope with them, how to make them not hurt us anymore. This is healing. So, I ask the question again. Is forgiveness good for health? But now, I replace the first part of the question. Is remembering an aggression and not feeling pain good for your health? But what is health? What's the definition of health? And then that brings us to the World Health Organization definition of health. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. That means that if you have a perfect body, no diseases in your body, no organic diseases in your body, and you live in Rwanda in 1994, you are not healthy because you don't have a complete state of mental well-being, because you are in the middle of a genocide. So, for us, we need a little bit more. We need to get better in this definition. And I do not know a better definition of health than the one that Emmanuel brought us in a book with Chico Xavier, when he says that health is the state of perfect harmony of the soul. If this soul is in a perfect harmony, connected to God, to the creation, this soul is in health, in a health state. And that's why I keep saying that by this definition, health is the same thing as happiness, because we cannot imagine that a soul that is a soul, a spirit that is connected to the Creator in perfect harmony is not happy. So we ask the question again. Is remembering an aggression and not feeling pain, does that make you, does that brings you to a state of harmony of spirit? That's the question I would like to answer. That's the question that if we do answer, we will understand that forgiving people is good for your health. So let's begin. Let's begin. Let's begin. So there is this there is this part of the psychology called positive psychology that started to study the effects of positive emotions on human health, like courage, like optimism, like charity, resiliency, good humor. All those emotions, are they good for your health? So positive psychology began to study those emotions. But in order to understand the effects of those positive emotions in your health, they also had to study the effects of bad feelings in your health, like anger, jealous, madness, envy, bad humor, pessimism, and so on. So while they were studying the effect of those emotions in our body, they came up with the idea that not forgiving is also an emotion, a bad emotion that could bring us some prejudice. And they created this expression, this word, to represent that feeling. And that word is the word rumination. And rumination comes from a process that some kind of animals, like cows, do to eat and digest their food. So what does the cow do? The cow, it eats grass. So the cow chews the grass and swallow the grass. And when the cow swallows the grass goes to one of 4 stomach chambers. And there, in this first chamber, the grass suffers a process of chemical digestion. But this chemical digestion is not enough for the complete digestion of the grass. So the grass comes back to the mouth, where the cow has to chew it again. And after chewing it for the second time, the cow has to swallow the grass again. But this time, the grass goes to a second chamber, a second stomach chamber, where it suffers another chemical process. And then the grass comes up the mouth again. The cow chews it for the third time, swallow it for the third time for a third stomach chamber, and it goes on until the 4th stomach chamber, where the process of digestion is complete. So that brings us the idea that after eating the grass, the cow keeps remembering that she ate the grass the whole day. And that's what is rumination. That's what rumination is. Some people, when they are offended, they keep ruminating the aggression. They keep ruminating the idea, and they don't go on. They don't keep going with their lives. They stop living. And that rumination process takes control of their thoughts and their feelings. And they are stuck in that moment. They don't move forward with their lives. So, it's like our friend Rosandro talks in his speeches, as life is like a movie. So the movie keeps going, but you stop watching the movie and you take a picture of the moment you were offended. And from now on, you only look at the picture. You don't look at the movie. The movie is going on, bringing new experiences, new people, new life, new opportunities. But you miss all of them. You are just stuck looking at that moment in time, looking at that picture where people offended you, where the aggression took place. That's very bad. You stop living. You stop living. You stop conquering things for you in all aspects. So, when we began to study that, the body's answer to that rumination process, the physiological answer, we came out with a process that is well known in medicine, which is the body's answer to stress. This is a very well-known answer, and we also call it the fight or escape response. It is very useful when you are, for example, walking in the middle of a jungle and you are suddenly face to face with a lion and you have to run fast to save your life. Or when you are driving a car and you have to step on the brake all of a sudden because you almost crashed. Or when you're walking on the street and somebody with a gun is in front of you trying to steal and rob you. So what happens? There is this great injection of adrenaline and corticosteroids in your bloodstream. So when you are face to face to a lion, it's like doping. You get a lot of adrenaline and a lot of corticoids, and your muscles become more powerful. Your heart beats faster and stronger to deliver blood to the tissues, to the muscles. Your eye pupils get bigger, they dilate so you can see better to escape. Your lungs captures more oxygen from the air, so your blood are full of oxygen for your muscles, and you're ready to run or to fight. So people do amazing things in these states when they are doped by adrenaline and corticosteroids. So people jump high walls, running from a dog, a mad dog, for example, that in a normal state they would not be able to do. It's because you're doped with those two hormones. But this kind of reaction of fight or run, it lasts around 2 seconds. I'm sorry, around 2 minutes. And then you get relaxed. It's very short, it's a very short reaction. But what researchers found was that the same answer happens in a person who is ruminating, who does not forgive. And that does not last 2 minutes only. It lasts days, weeks, months, years, until the person decided to forgive, to move on, stop looking at the picture, and come back to watch the rest of the movie. And I will tell you that there is no human body that can cope with so much adrenaline and corticosteroids in the long term. The body will ask its price. So the first thing that happens is that high concentrations of corticosteroids is able to block or inhibit the immune system, as we can see in the picture. So people who have high doses of corticosteroids in the bloodstream because of rumination, they get infections easier than people who do not. So see where we just got, where we arrived. If you don't forgive, you are at higher risk of infections. But that's not the only thing. That's not the only point. High levels of adrenaline and corticosteroids also are able to high your blood pressure, hypertension. So your systemic blood pressure, your diastolic blood pressure, and your mean blood pressure are higher. So people who ruminate, they tend to be more hypertensive than other people. So we all know the consequences of hypertension for the human body. Higher risk of strokes, higher risk of myocardial infarction, higher risk of retinal damage, higher risk of end-stage kidney disease, higher risk of leg ulcers because the circulation is not good. So when you are face-to-face to a person that ruminates, there is a great chance that that person has a higher risk of infections and a higher risk of the consequences of hypertension. But that's not only the only thing. Many scientific papers, they bring together rumination and the risk of psychiatric disorders as well. It's well established in the scientific literature that people who do not forgive, that hang on to resentment, they have higher risk of psychiatric disorders. Which ones? By what mechanism? So this image shows us that people who ruminate, they can behave in two different ways. First of all, if they cope with resiliency, if they use coping strategies, if they bring to perform new tasks, if they change the focus of their attention to the movie and not to the picture, they tend to do well. But people who ruminate, that do not apply those coping strategies, they tend to have psychiatric disorders. Which ones? All of them. Schizophrenic manifestations, depression, anxiety disorders, panic disorders, and all sorts of psychiatric disorders. Which means for us who are spiritists, that rumination, it's not only bad for your physical body, but it's also bad for our soul, for our spirit, because most part of the psychiatric disorders are mind disorders, which it turns to be spiritual disorders. So this is all published in scientific papers with evidence that forgiving would avoid all of that. This is so important that the World Health Organization published a paper considering forgiveness a public health issue. For the WHO, forgiving is so important as vaccines, as the fight against obesity, the fight against cigarette smoking, the fight against sanitation, poor sanitation, the fight against diabetes and hypertension. It has the same weight. See where we come? The World Health Organization considering the act to forgive people so important as the other issues for human health. That for me was life-changing. And it's very easy for us spiritists to explain that. Let's think a little bit. We are 7 billion people living in this planet, incarnated right now. And we all know that we do not live in a very evolved planet. We live in a planet of proofs and expiations. I think that's the term in English. And if we live in this planet, it means we are not that evolved either. So we hurt people. We offend people. And if we hurt people, people are offended. So there should be a few billion people walking around the planet ruminating aggressions. And if that's true, those people are at higher risk for infections, stroke, myocardial infarction, end-stage kidney disease, eye disease, and psychiatric disorders. Imagine that, how much that will cost for the health systems all over the world. Imagine how many people are suffering, are living miserable lives, are getting sick. because they don't forgive. So that's very important. That's a very important point to consideration. I brought one scientific research among many that I found in the scientific literature. When researchers, they took two groups of people. One of them was aggressors. They offended people in a brutal way, like Samputu had suffered, very strong aggressions. And they took the victims of those aggressions. And the researchers, they applied questionnaires to both groups. So for the victims, they applied a questionnaire asking them about their quality of life, their health, their psychiatric health, their physical health. And then they asked the question, you have three options. A, to forgive your aggressor. B, to forgive your aggressor and search for reconciliation. And C, not to forgive your aggressor. And they collected those data. They collected that data and they saved it. And they did the same thing with the aggressors. They asked in a questionnaire their quality of life after causing so much harm to somebody. They asked about their psychiatric health and their physical health. And then they collected that data and presented to the aggressor which option their victim had selected, A, B, or C. And then they waited a few months. After a few months, they put together the two group of people, and they asked the victims. Excuse me. They asked the aggressors, how were they living after the first interview, the aggressors. And those that learned that their victims had chosen options A or B, forgive and search reconciliation, were much better than those that learned that their victims had not forgotten him, had not forgiven them. So this research shows us that to forgive somebody and let them know is an act of charity, is an act of love, and it's good for the aggressor's health. Incredible, isn't it? The questionnaire had higher scores. But the surprise came when the researchers made the same analysis on the answers of the victims. The victims that had chosen options A or B, to forgive and try reconciliation with their aggressors, had even a better score than the aggressors who were forgiven. So that shows that forgiveness is good for your health, your mental health. That's an evidence that suggests that forgiveness is good for your mental health, and the scores of psychiatric health were better in the second questionnaire for both groups, but they were even better for the victims. And that made me think. I had heard that before. You had heard that before. Somebody had said that before, but we didn't take it too seriously. Who was that? Who said that before? Let's travel a little bit in time and remember what Saint Francis said in his prayer, or San Francisco in Brazil. Lord, please make me forgive more than to be forgiven. Isn't that true? So we come back in time And we realize that what he said in Italy a long time ago has a scientific base. It may be correct scientifically. And that is extremely comforting. Because Spiritism is a science. Allan Kardec was one of the three supporters, one of the three pillars of Spiritism. And it's very important that our doctrine, Spiritism, is supported by scientific evidence that it is true. The great Leon Denis once said that Spiritism will be scientific or it will not survive. And that's true. We also know that love and forgiveness is as important as the scientific aspect of Spiritism. But we cannot neglect the scientific aspect of the feelings, including forgiveness. So Allan Kardec dedicated a lot of time and a lot of space in his work to deal with forgiveness. 2 chapters comes to mind. Chapter 10 and chapter 12 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, where our codificator, our master, will bring us his analysis of some things that Jesus said about forgiveness. And when he said that we should forgive our enemies, sometimes people do not believe that, and people say it is impossible. Remember what I asked in the beginning of the talk. What is your limit to forgive? The quality, the strength of your forgiveness ability. Can you forgive a person who killed your father, your mother, your sister, and your 2 brothers? They are your enemies. Can you forgive your enemy? So what Allan Kardec brings us in his analysis is that he was so wise, is that you do not live to have the same affection you have for your loved ones to this person. That's the way you forgive. You don't need to sit with them and have dinner, lunch, walk, giving hands with the aggressor every day, every time. But what you have to do and what you must do as a Christian and as a Spiritist is pray for this person to have a good life, to get better in life, to transform themselves, to be better people. And you have to not feel pain when you remember the aggression. That's what Allan Kardec means when he says, forgive your enemy. When he studies what Jesus said about forgive your enemies. So you have to wish them well and good. And if they search you, they look for you, asking for reconciliation, you have the obligation to try to reconciliate. You have to make the effort to reconciliate. That's what Allan Kardec meant by forgiving your enemies. Excuse me. So, let's move on. Another one. The great Martin Luther King. He said on his wonderful speech that I recommend that everybody reads on internet, loving your enemies. He said that it's not possible to love your enemy if you do not have the capacity to forgive. You have to remember that people have a good side and a bad side. Because people offended you, it does not mean that they are all bad. They have qualities, they have good side, and you have to look at them through this good side as well. And if people search for you, look for you in order to reconciliate, you do not need to humiliate the enemy, but you should seek for his friendship and for his understanding. That's very important. I am absolutely convinced, as a physician and as a spiritist guy, spiritist man, a Christian, that forgiveness is essential for happiness. Without forgiving small things and big things, small aggressions and big aggressions, we are not able to be happy. We will not feel ourselves free to evolve, to look for God, to connect our spirit to God, to be in harmony to God, as the great Emmanuel said. I am absolutely convinced in my daily practice that my patients go better if they forgive them, if they forgive their families, and if they forgive life itself. So, what else? What else do we find that in Spiritism? We should not forget that André Luiz brought us a whole bunch of books, a collection of books that brings in their core the absence of forgiveness. So André Luiz brings a lot of stories, a lot of cases in where somebody is suffers obsession, you will find a story that involves a non-forgiving situation. I'm learning right now that we live in a planet of trials and expiations. That's how we say in English. So, correcting the expression I used before. So we can see that how much people suffer on André Luiz's books because they don't forgive. So for us spiritists, it's one more reason to forgive, because we know that life keeps going after our body dies. And we will suffer the consequences of not forgiving after life as well. So that's mandatory to bring forgiveness to our daily life, to our daily mission. And to end this talk, I would like to bring you a story of our Master Jesus Christ. I have heard from many people that Jesus was a theoretician of forgiveness, that he only talked about forgiveness, but he did not give the example of forgiveness. And when I heard that, I was shocked, and I decided to put this story at the end of this talk to show the great capacity of forgiveness that this Spirit, Jesus Christ, have. So Jesus was there, stuck in the cross. He was tortured and crucified, and he was stuck in the cross. And he was in pain, and he was in agony, and he was suffering. And then he remembered the 12 men that followed him during those 3 wonderful years when he was able to teach them the gospel, the good news from the heavens. And he missed them so much at that moment. They were not there. Only John was there with Mary, his mother, who was suffering a lot to watch her son stuck in the cross. And John could not do anything to help. Neither could do Mary. So in that moment of extreme agony and pain, Jesus looked at the mob, and he suddenly realized and recognized a face which was the face of the bad spirit, the one who had tempted him in the desert and had tempted him in the mountain. And this bad spirit, this shadow, came close to Jesus and told him, "See, where are your friends? They left you. They left in your most difficult time, in your most difficult moment. What kind of friends are those? Deny them, and I will take you away from this cross and make you the king of heavens and earth, if you do deny them." And in that moment of extreme pain and suffering, Jesus looked at the shadow spirit, but he also looked at the sky. And he was able to express one of the most beautiful words we have in account. "Father, please forgive them. They don't know what they are doing." So, stuck in the cross, Jesus forgave for the first time. In his most difficult moment, in his passage in earth, he was not a theoretician of forgiveness. He applied the knowledge. He applied the idea. He applied the emotion and the feeling, the charity, the love of forgiveness. But the story doesn't end there. At this moment, this bad spirit went away. Jesus had won, and the sky turned gray and black. And the wind was blowing strong, and a lot of loud noises were heard everywhere. And all of a sudden, flashes of light came from the sky through the clouds in a spiritual panorama that only a few could see. And these flashes of light were very evolved spirits, angels of God, that came to help the Master, our Master Jesus Christ, in his most difficult moment. One of them took care of his crown of spikes that were hurting his head. Another one was face to face with his hands, diminishing the pain he was feeling in his wrists because of the nails, the 10 centimeters nails that were crossing his wrists. The other one did the same thing in his feet. But the most lightful one, the most bright one, the brighter one, stood face to Jesus. And Jesus made a sign with his lips. A sign noticeable enough for the angel to turn his ear to Jesus. And Jesus spoke very soft words in the angel's ear, which made the angel smile from one ear to another ear. He got away from Jesus, and he went deep down on earth to rescue Judas, the one who betrayed Jesus for 30 coins of silver. So Jesus, for the second time, forgave during his crucifixion process, proving that he was not a theoretician of forgiveness. He gave us the example. He gave us the path That's the way we should follow. We should forgive in the most difficult moments of our lives. So, where does this bring us? What about Jean Paul Samputu? He was advised to forgive. But what I did not tell you is that the person who killed his family was his own step-brother, his half-brother, who was born orphan and was raised by Samputu's father and Samputu's mother as his own brother. But this man happened to be a Hutu. And as a Hutu, he was threatened by the leaders of the genocide to kill Samputu's family, his own family, who raised him. And the leaders told him, if you do not kill them, we will kill you. It has to be you to cause a greater impact in society. And after knowing that, that's the reason why Samputu was so shaken, so broken. That's why he used drugs, because he could not realize that his stepbrother could have done that. He could not forgive. When he learned he had to forgive to survive, he came back to Rwanda. And after the genocide was over, his stepbrother was judged. He went to trial. And on that day, Samputu was in the audience. And he asked the word. He took the microphone. He wanted to speak. And publicly, he forgave his stepbrother. And after that, they went out for dinner. And they had a conversation. And his stepbrother had the opportunity to tell him that he was threatened. If he hadn't done that, he would be the one who was going to be killed. Not that that fact justify the crimes, because a lot of Christians lost their lives in the past because they refused to take somebody's life. But that was enough for Jean Paul Samputu to put himself in his stepbrother's place and imagine that he might have done the same. So he realized he was in a turning point moment of his life. He realized that he had to forgive to survive. And from that day on, both of them decided to travel the whole world, giving speeches, giving talks about the power, the strength of forgiveness in our life. In this picture, you are able to see Jean Paul Samputu hugging his stepbrother who killed his father, his mother, his sister, and his two brothers. And what Samputu keeps saying all the time, and it is what we try to show during this talk, is this sentence: forgiveness is for you. You do not forgive to be good to the other one. You do not forgive to impress society. You forgive because it's a necessity. You forgive because it's good for you. It's good for your health, your organic health. It's good for your mind, for your spirit, and it's good for your spirit journey as an immortal being, as a being that lives forever. We evolve by forgiving. It's part of charity. It's part of love. It's part of our intimal reformation, right? Of our self-correctness. So, I hope I had And I would like to thank Jussara and everybody from the US Spirit Federation for this opportunity to talk with you about this subject, which is very kind to my heart. Thank you very much, and I hope you see you anytime soon.
Vicente, that was beautiful, so inspiring. At the same time, we realize that it's so hard for us to be able to feel and to understand forgiveness as Jesus implied and tried to teach us in each and every moment of his life. We do understand that without forgiveness, there will be not necessarily true happiness, because it was said, forgiveness is for us, and we have to start learning forgiving ourselves, not imagining that we are all capable of going about the world without erring, making mistakes, and we are all here to learn. But it's important for us to know the spiritual and even the scientific implications of what a lack of forgiveness, or at least willingness to forgive, can cause to our physical, emotional, and spiritual health. And you have brought that explanation to us brilliantly today. We are so happy, so blessed to have been able to hear you. Your English was excellent. It was so good. So I'm so sure that more invitations from around the world will come now, because we from other parts of the world, that you are in Brazil, and but there are many places in the world where we can only spread this knowledge in the English language, when not in their own native language, because English nowadays is very well known. So thank you so much thank you everyone for having been keeping up with us here all these weeks. Yeah, I was crying, so that's why I have something in my throat. That story of Subhutu was very, very beautiful. But next week we will have our friend Stephen Bertozzo. He is from Ireland. He is the president of the Ireland Spiritist Federation. And he's going to be talking to us at a subject that is called During a Storm in Our Life. So don't miss next week as well at 11 a.m. From Ireland. We will be here again in New York City, transmitting his talk about our friend Stefan Bertozzo. Once again, thank you so much, Vicente, and we are going to end our presentation also with a thought of gratitude to our Heavenly Creator, to all the good spirits that have been assisting and guiding us and inspiring us, even to go the extra mile, knowing our limitations, whatever they are, but not losing sight that the most important thing is for us to give whatever we have in order to better the life of our brothers and sisters. And this is the main purpose of Spiritism. Whatever any Spiritist, whatever you have, whatever we have, we will give you with all our love. So stay with us, and next week we will bring you more and more of those beautiful topics and talks that our dear friends have been giving to us. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you.